Well, Sean Bell is a retired British Air Vice-Marshal and is now an advisor at Universal Defence and Security Solutions. Sean Bell, welcome. When Ukrainian officials call this the Battle of Donbass and that it's underway, what should we expect in the coming days?
Yeah, I mean, listening to your earlier correspondence, I think Putin's objectives for Ukraine have clearly changed. Phase one was to walk into the whole of Ukraine. That clearly didn't work, and the battles to get into Kiev didn't work. Having rethought, regrouped, Russia is now much more focused around the Donbass region and is bringing force to bear there. And we're expecting a very, very brutal battle. You've got dug-in, very determined Ukrainian forces who are protecting their land. And you've now, as your correspondent said, from the north, east and south, significant quantities of Russian troops and equipment massing in the region. I think what's most disturbing is the scale of the conflict. The one thing that Russia, though, can't replace is good training. It hasn't performed well so far, and they're not going to have a magic wand to suddenly make their troops behave any better. But it's likely to be an extremely brutal and bloody battle ahead.
Surrounded Ukrainian soldiers have pleaded for international help. Is there anything that can now be done to intervene and save the defenders of Mariupol?
I think the story of Mariupol, there'll be books written about this in the future. The short answer to your question is no, but the brave Ukrainian fighters, they've now become a symbol of Ukrainian resistance to the Russian invasion. And whatever happens to them, I think that will harden the Ukrainians' resolve to fight. I think even if Putin does claim Mariupol eventually, it'll be a Pyrrhic victory because he will have destroyed the city. He will have destroyed lives and homes. He will have killed thousands of people. And of course, at the cost of thousands of Russian troops, the Russian economy, Russian pride and Russian international standing. So it can hardly really be claimed to be a victory, even if or when he takes Mariupol.
Well, I wanted to explore that a bit further with you, because for those of us who are not from a military background, I mean, how much of a strategic victory could capturing Mariupol be, given that so much damage has been done to the infrastructure of the city and to the people who lived there?
Well, I think you'd have to go back to Putin for this one. I mean, if he originally intended to take the whole of Ukraine, most Western analysts believe now this land bridge between Russia and the Crimea is his objective. And of course, that includes the Donbass and Mariupol. But having literally obliterated the city, it's very difficult to see what that victory entails for him. And your correspondent was talking about how this conflict ends. Even if certain lands are taken by Putin, how does the negotiation subsequently go? Because even if President Zelensky was prepared to give up some land, cede some land, how on earth would he take any security guarantees from Putin, given the fact that Putin's invaded twice in 8 years? And if you remember back to 1994, when there was a Budapest memorandum where Russia, America and Ukraine all signed a deal, because at the time Ukraine was the third largest nuclear power as a result of the fall of the Soviet Union. And they both, Russia and America, guaranteed the sovereignty and the borders of Ukraine. Well, given that Putin has clearly just walked in, how on earth would any guarantees be worth anything? So it's very difficult to see how this conflict will ultimately be brought to an end.
Russia has admitted to suffering a large number of losses during this invasion. How significant is that admission, and does that hit home perhaps in Russia, or will that simply not be broadcast and understood, other than by the families who have lost their loved ones?
Yes, I think we're seeing a drip feed. It's very hard to understand the media controls in Russia, where they hear one story. Putin might paint it as the West versus the East, but in reality, Ukraine is full of independent journalists reporting, and that is how the Western style of reporting is going. But of course, you can't hide the fact that many of your young soldiers, conscripts who probably came to Ukraine expecting to be welcomed with open arms are going back in body bags. And therefore, as those numbers mount, it's increasingly difficult to paint this as a positive story, which is why I think we're seeing Russia admit to some of the losses. But as your correspondent was saying earlier, most of the story being fed to Russia is nothing like the truth that we can see from the ground ourselves. And I think that's just symbolic of the very strange nature. You know, Putin has invaded another country. He'd probably expect it to be almost bloodless like it was in Crimea. The reality now is he's got himself in a real corner. He's undermined Russian credibility. It's cost him thousands of Russian lives. The Russian military hasn't performed very well. And it's very difficult to see how Russian standing will be enhanced internationally as a result of this dreadful act of war.
Former Air Vice Marshal Sean Bell, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.